Hollow Creek, Georgia, was the kind of town where everybody knew everybody, or at least thought they did. The courthouse stood at the corner of Main and Ash, draped in red bricks, pride, and the illusion of justice. Just a few blocks down, beneath the southern sun and among whispering pine trees, lived Eli Brooks, a 64-year-old war veteran, retired Army colonel, and quiet fixture of the community. He walked with a slight limp from shrapnel he'd taken in Fallujah, but it was his steady eyes, not his gait, that caught people off guard. They were sharp, calculating, patient, the eyes of a man who had seen war, buried friends, and fought battles in silence long after the battlefield. Eli didn't ask for much. He lived in a modest one-story home with an American flag mounted above his porch in a garden he tended every morning. He was a man who helped the neighborhood kids with their bikes, volunteered at the local VA, and brought fresh squash to the widowed Miss Helen down the road. But one Thursday afternoon, everything changed. It was just after 3 p.m. when Eli left the VA clinic after a routine blood pressure check. He wore khakis, a tucked-in polo shirt, and drove an old but well-maintained Ford truck. He stopped at the local Quick Mart for a gallon of milk and a loaf of bread. Inside, the cashier, a young white man named Cole, eyed him suspiciously. 2 officers, Deputy Sean Mercer and Deputy Kyle Thorne, were standing near the cooler, drinking cheap coffee out of styrofoam cups. Eli nodded politely. Mercer didn't nod back. 10 minutes later, as Eli was halfway home, red and blue lights lit up behind him. He pulled over calmly. Thorne swaggered up, resting his hand unnecessarily on his holstered gun. License and registration, he barked. Eli complied. Any reason I'm being stopped, officer? Suspicious activity, Mercer replied as he came up on the other side. Suspicious buying bread and milk? Eli asked evenly. Mercer didn't answer. Instead, he asked Eli to step out of the vehicle. Within minutes, things escalated. Thorne opened the passenger door and found a small baggie of white powder tucked under the seat. Eli stared. That's not mine. Of course it's not, Mercer mocked. Turn around. Hands behind your back. They cuffed him roughly, slammed him onto the hood, and read him his rights. Eli spent the next 48 hours in a holding cell. No phone call, no explanation, just a cold metal of betrayal pressing against his back as he sat on the concrete bench. His thoughts didn't race. He'd trained his mind long ago to stay calm under pressure. What disturbed him wasn't the cell. It was a realization that his country, once again, saw his skin before his service. On the 3rd morning, a young public defender, Amara Giles, walked in, biracial, mid-30s, sharp as a tack, and visibly frustrated. They're charging you with possession with intent to distribute. Felony, 10 to 15 years. Eli looked her straight in the eye. You don't believe them, do you? Amara blinked. No, I don't. I pulled your records. You're a Silver Star recipient. You led rescue ops in Iraq. You taught at West Point. None of this makes sense. Because it's a lie, Eli said simply. She leaned forward. Then let's burn their lie to the ground. The trial was set for 2 months later. Word traveled fast in Hollow Creek. Most of the townspeople only knew Eli as the quiet old black man who kept to himself. The news branded him a suspected drug trafficker. The courtroom buzzed with whispers. Judge Henry Wycliffe, an old-school white man with a stiff upper lip and powdered wig tendencies, presided over the case. Mercer and Thorne testified first. They painted Eli as evasive, aggressive, and nervous, claimed they smelled marijuana in his vehicle, that his answers didn't add up, that he resisted arrest. Then came the evidence, the baggie, the lab results, the photos. The jury, a mixed but mostly white group, watched in silence. Amara, however, had come prepared. She presented video footage from a private security camera at the Quick Mart. Eli was calm, respectful. There was no evidence of him acting nervous. No resistance. Then she introduced expert testimony from a forensic specialist. There were no fingerprints on the baggie, not even Eli's. But what made the courtroom freeze was the bombshell Amara dropped next. She requested to call a character witness. Retired General Thomas Reynolds, former U.S. Army Joint Chief. General Reynolds entered the courtroom with a quiet but commanding presence. The room stood still. Under oath, he testified. Colonel Elijah Brooks is not just a veteran. He's a hero. He personally saved 6 of my men during an ambush in Baghdad. He's a man of honor, discipline, and moral clarity. The idea that he would deal drugs is not only laughable, it's offensive to everything this country claims to stand for. Gasps. A few jury members stared at Eli like they were seeing him for the first time. Amara then produced documents showing that Mercer and Thorne had been under internal review for racial profiling complaints. 7, in fact, all mysteriously dismissed. The judge tried to maintain order, but the damage was done. During closing arguments, Amara spoke with fire. They targeted him because of his skin, because they thought he was alone, because they believed they could get away with it. They didn't know who he was. But now you do. The jury returned in under 2 hours. Not guilty. As the verdict was read, Mercer's jaw clenched. Thorne looked pale. The DA's office quietly began reviewing their conduct. Within weeks, both officers were suspended pending further investigation. Eli walked out of the courthouse into the afternoon sun, surrounded by reporters, veterans, and neighbors who now remember more than his garden or his porch. They remembered his sacrifice, his dignity. Later that week, Eli stood before a packed crowd at the Hollow Creek Community Center. I didn't serve this country to be treated like an enemy at home. I fought for justice overseas. I demanded here, too. The uniform I wore doesn't wash off. Neither does the color of my skin. But both deserve respect. Applause roared. And as the video of his speech went viral, the nation listened, if only for a moment, to the truth it too often tried to ignore.